Hello and welcome. This is a short presentation about teaching and a career in education, and it is part of our careers awareness work. So why consider a career in teaching and education? Well, first of all, you're working with young people, and that's really exciting because you're working with a different generation from yourself who've grown up in very different circumstances, a different world with different technology. And so whilst teaching, you're always learning at the same time. You're also developing and improving your practice continually, and that's something in my own experience that's never stopped. I've learned more and more each year that's passed. It's also a chance to share ideas with other people, and you get to work with other people with great ideas. And it's interesting how often you learn things from people who've come new to the profession. So I could have been teaching 20 years, but someone comes in as a newly qualified teacher and they've got some latest ideas, often harnessing new technology or using new breakthroughs in teaching and learning that perhaps you hadn't been aware of. And so they bring all those things to the table as well. You get to work in great teams, and the advice I'd give to anyone who's considering a career in education is get yourself in teams, build teams up around you. And those teams can be inside your school, but they can also be outside your school. One of the things I've done in my role as a head teacher is that I've built up a network of relationships with other very similar schools with like-minded approaches, very similar ethos and culture and values. And we've been able to support each other and help each other and challenge each other as well. Those things have been enormously beneficial, and they're free as well. If you're part of a team, suddenly the job just becomes more enjoyable and far easier. So collaboration, relationship building, team building are absolutely critical to success. It's also a chance for you to share your own learning with other people as well. And there is something nice about sharing the things that you've learned yourself, and it makes you proud of what you can do. The other thing to remember with teaching is that it isn't like a number of other jobs. It is unique. You can't really describe it to people. You come home at the end of the day and it's very hard to describe what happened, but it's always important to remember it is a vocation, it's a profession, and most importantly it's a service. You are serving a community and you're serving young people. What's brilliant with people who go into a life in education is they often could have earned far more in terms of wealth, salary, if they'd gone into a different field. But they've chosen to do something where they are making a difference, where they're helping young people, and that's one of the key differences that is really important to be aware of. You go home with a sense of pride. Sometimes you don't achieve what you want to achieve, and sometimes you don't succeed with a particular individual or group of individuals. But overall, you know that you've done your best and you have really tried to make a difference. And that is why you get PE teachers at weekends standing in lonely, windy fields watching cross country, or concerts taking place late in December with a very weary music or drama teacher leading it. It's that extra commitment, and it goes beyond and above the job. And some people don't always realise that, don't always appreciate it, but you know yourself that you've made a difference. As a teacher, you build up a huge skill set and it lasts you your whole life, and you never stop perfecting it. And I think it's an underrated profession in this sense. When I first became a teacher, I didn't yet have the skills. I came as the unfinished product, if you like, after teacher training, and I'd been in school placements in and around Leicester, and I'd learnt a lot across the whole age range from 11 all the way through to 18, 19. But there was a lot I didn't know, and I knew that I didn't know those things. And you learn those things very quickly, and you have to hit the ground running. And you have some classes that are easy to manage and enjoyable to manage. You have others that take longer, and sometimes it takes you weeks or months to really get on top of a particular group. But once you start to develop those skills, often by learning from people around you or people with more experience, you do get that great sense of achievement that you've managed to overcome difficulties. What's been really interesting to me, though, is through those skills that are very strong within teaching, you learn to build relationships, you learn to build people's self-esteem, you learn to command an audience, you learn how to praise and to encourage in a way that is genuine and people know that you mean it. And when the children know that you really care about them and that you're really interested, the job becomes much easier, and a lot of the discipline issues disappear very quickly and surprisingly. And you also learn to set out your expectations, and sometimes not to sort of humbly ask for something, but politely to tell the students what the expectations are, and that makes a huge difference. Interestingly for me, I found that the same skills I learnt in managing a class really held me in good stead when it came to managing teams of staff. and managing relationships on a wider scale at senior level as well. And that came as a surprise to me, but I didn't realise just how strong those skills that you develop in the classroom are. And I think sometimes we undersell them as a profession, but they are absolutely amazing. As a tutor, I was a tutor for many years. I was a tutor for about 20 years. And you get to develop the person. But the way I always saw tutoring is that you are removing barriers to success. You're making sure that every child gets a fair crack of the whip. And no two children are the same. They're not identical. That you're working with 30 individuals often in a class or in a tutor group. And once you understand that, the job becomes much more straightforward. But you treat everyone fairly and you treat everyone equally, but you don't treat them the same way. But what you do always do is you always put the education first. So the tutor role is to develop the person and to support and to encourage, and it has that welfare role. But the most important form of welfare is educational welfare. So essentially what you're doing is you're trying your best to reduce the barriers that inhibit learning for all children. If you then go on to be a subject leader and a pastoral leader, you learn amazing skills with this. As a subject leader, you finally have the control to develop the subject in the way that you want. And usually it's the subject that is your specialism and you were passionate about when you first started teaching. So you really care about that. And it's your chance to sell the story. My own subject happened to be history. I've devoted a lot of my life, my holidays, my weekends to visiting historical places. So I was always able to illustrate all the teaching with in interesting places I'd visited or things I'd learnt along the way or scenes I'd witnessed, and far and wide really. And that always made it more interesting for the pupils because they could see that it was more than just a textbook or a worksheet or a PowerPoint. It was something way beyond that. When I became a pastoral leader, that's when I first learned never to panic, because no 2 days were the same. Some incident could occur inside school, outside school, over a holiday, over a weekend, and whatever plans you had for the day were totally derailed by this. Now, at first, that's quite daunting and overwhelming, but after a while you start thinking, right, okay, I'm not going to panic. And quite often before 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd sorted out 4 or 5 major things that may have phased someone new to the role, but you quickly learn to manage those things, and you build up relationships, and you're dealing often with the general public that can be extremely varied in needs and nature, but you do become very skilled at dealing with them. When I became a senior leader, I found that I had the power to influence, and areas like control of data and school performance and the timetable, and particularly modelling the curriculum, they are really exciting areas to be involved in, and you can start to use all of your experience to influence on a much bigger scale. Finally, I became a head teacher. And I would still describe being a head teacher as the best job in the world. It gives me an enormous sense of achievement. And one day, when I'm no longer doing this role and doing something different, I will look back on this period and think, wow, you managed to take a school from A to B. You managed to get a school from where it was to something that was stronger and better equipped for the modern world. And you'd like to think that served the young people in its care really well, and also served the staff really well with their own career progression and their own desires and ambitions. So I would still say, even though it's a really tough job, I would say being a head teacher is the best job in the world. Years ago, I was teaching in Warwickshire, and the head teacher at the time, he asked all of the staff in an assembly to name somebody influential and important who was English. And I think it was St. George's Day, and that was the reason. And I came up with Thomas More, so I came up with a historical figure. I've always been really interested in Thomas More and in that whole period of the Reformation, how the country swung from Catholic to Protestant and back to Catholic again and then into Protestant. A very interesting period. And he went away and he did an assembly about Thomas More after that, and he related it to the play A Man for All Seasons by Robert Bolt, which is an amazing play and well worth seeing. In the play, there's a character called Richard Rich, who is a desperate character, ruthlessly ambitious, wants to scale his way to the top regardless of moral integrity or talent. He's just ambitious. And he begs Thomas More to take him into his fold and to introduce him to the court of Henry VIII. Now, Thomas More says, well, have you considered other careers? And he says at one point, what about teaching? Have you thought about teaching? So this is a little bit of the script from that. So Thomas More says to Richard Rich, why not be a teacher? You'd be a fine teacher. perhaps a great one. And Richard Rich replies, if I was, who would know it? And Thomas More replies, you, your pupils, your friends, God. Not a bad public, that. And this touches a really important part to do with teaching, that it isn't just about fame and glory in life and wealth. It's about being a good person, doing the right things for the right reasons. And that's really what Thomas More is saying. You don't have to be ambitious. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be in the court of Henry VIII in order to be judged a success. You could just be a person who's done good things. And you and the children you teach will know that. Now, Richard Rich rejects this advice, and in the end, when Thomas More refuses to accept the divorce from Catherine of Aragon and Henry's subsequent marriage to Anne Boleyn, he falls foul of Henry, and he's marked down as a traitor, and he's sent to the Tower of London and is eventually beheaded. But when he's put on trial, Richard Rich is one of the people who brings about the downfall of Thomas More. And it's a very powerful sketch. But I think there's a really important lesson there about the importance of teaching and what we should really be focused on. Later on in life, you'll bump into people that you've taught. I was doing an Outward Bound course a few years ago, and I bumped into a lad that I taught 5 years, maybe even 10 years earlier, and he still remembered me. And he remembered really funny things. He remembered the amount of coffee I drank and things like that. But what really struck me is this is a lad who had always been a lovely lad at school, never really shone academically, but just a great person. And since leaving school, he'd travelled the world, and he was now working in his passion, which was mountaineering and outward bound activities like canoeing and abseiling and all these kind of things. And all through my life, I've met people who I taught 5 or 10 years earlier. One person I met actually does a lot of work to support the school now. And I taught her more than 25 years ago for GCSE and A-level, and she's now the head of a law firm in London that's doing extremely well, and she made contact with me, and she remembered things from my lessons that I had forgotten. But what it really taught me is that it's like dropping a pebble into a calm pond. The ripples go on and on and on. You don't realise the impact you're having, sometimes in a bad way, but usually I'd like to think in a good way. You have this amazing impact on people in a very important, influential, formative part of their lives, and that sticks with them forever. So you have more power than you realise as a teacher. But those encounters when you meet well-rounded people, and they share recollections and funny things that happened in the lessons, and you hear about their success stories, it's one of the most rewarding things of all. And interestingly, it often isn't about the grades that they got, and it isn't about the specific lessons that you taught, but they really remember things that happened on school trips and on residential outward bound courses, and funny things that happened in class. And what they really remember is not so much what they learned from you, but how you managed to make them feel, and the pride and the self-worth that you gave them. They're the things that they keep with them. So how do you get into teaching? Well, there are all different ways. Some people like to get some experience of schools first. They volunteer within a school. They do work like listening to children reading, or they shadow people in a school for a week or sometimes longer. Sometimes they train as a teaching assistant and build up experience in that way for a year, or as a learning support assistant, or within the library or study centre, and then go on to teacher training afterwards. That really gives them a good inside working knowledge of a school, and it means that they know what they're getting into when they eventually go on to train as a teacher. You can do the PGCE route after your degree, or you can engage in a skit programme or through Schools Direct, and there are some routes that enable you to earn money while you're doing it, or to spend more time based in the classroom. You need to decide on the best route for you, but what I would say is there's no harm in having a teaching qualification, and it can really stand you in good stead, and it gives you options to work across the country or even work abroad. So it's always a useful qualification, and the skills and experiences you can build up as a teacher will really stand you in good stead in later life. So good luck with it. Consider it as an option. It is a great way to spend your career. I've certainly enjoyed 3 decades in education now, and I've learned a tremendous amount, and I continue to learn all the time. So good luck, and I wish you all the very best.